Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for giving me a chance to share everything that I have gotten to learn really in the past. I think I'm at eight months or so on the platform. So if any of you are Smart Suite newbies and you're worried that you can't do it because you don't have the experience or you're not techie enough, hopefully that'll be inspirational to you all, that I've been in here 8 months and this is what I've gotten up to. So you definitely can. I really appreciate all of you who took the time to attend. I know for those of you who are in higher ed, you are probably either wrapping up student grading or celebrating that you just finished student grading at the end of the semester. Empathy if you're still working on it, celebration if you're done. One of the things that led me here today is the discovery I've made over the past 5 years as a faculty member that while we're in higher ed, we almost universally at this time in history have some sort of organizational goal or strategy that says we will be innovative, we will be continually improving. And yet, and I know you all know this, for some reason, and I won't go into all of that here, the nature of higher education as an industry itself actually makes it one of the hardest environments to create meaningful change. So if I can leave you with one thing today, it's that I want you to know that there are endless options you can use to meet your needs and that it pays to be curious and to advocate for what you need to serve your students and to complete your mission as an instructor or whatever your role is in higher ed. Okay, so I'm going to start off today with just a little bit about me and specifically a little bit about the context of this project, just so you understand the environment that I'm working in. I think that will lend itself well to understanding how I got to where I am. As Rick said, my name is Caitlin Pierce. The title I currently hold is the Clinical Coordinator and the Director of the Online BS Degree Completion Program in the Department of Medical Laboratory Sciences at VCU. Very rarely do I put all of that in one sentence, so I won't be repeating it. I have been at VCU for 5 years at this point, actually as of this next week, so woohoo. I am celebrating my 10th wedding anniversary next week as well, and I am the mother of a 5-year-old who's far too smart for his own good. And I add these parts so that you understand that there's a lot going on in the background of my life, as there is for all of you, that makes it difficult to balance, especially when we find ourselves in a multi-hat role, as we often do in higher ed. On top of all of that, I am currently a PhD candidate in the College of Health Professions, hoping to finish my dissertation this year. So that's my personal context, just so you have a bit of a view. Now, a little bit about where I'm working in the environment that I'm in. So I work for the Department of Medical Laboratory Sciences at the VCU College of Health Professions. Medical lab professionals are the ones who are behind the scenes in healthcare. We take the specimens, sometimes we collect them as part of our job, but beyond that, we perform the actual scientific operations on the specimens to get the results that your other healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, therapists all need to provide care. So we are considered essential healthcare providers, and our program is one of the earliest in the US, near as we can tell. The record keeping is a little fuzzy because of the way our certification grew over time, but we started in 1927, which we estimate to mean we're one of the first. We have 2 bachelor's degrees tracks, one that is in person for traditional students and one that is a bridge program from associates to bachelor's. And then we also have 4 now master's degree tracks as of this year. We had 3 previously. 4 of those tracks, 1 of the bachelor's and 3 of the master's, all require some degree of a clinical placement, meaning that the students spend a required period of time with one of our clinical partners, so local hospitals, independent labs, bigger health systems, and perform what you can think of as an apprenticeship. If you guys are not in healthcare, that's the easiest way to think of it. So what this boils down to is that we average probably around 120 to maybe 130 students right now across all our programs at any given time. And annually, because of the number of rotations that each student has to complete, we have to complete between 180 and 200 unique placements that happen across 7 to 10 organizations in 15 to 20 different locations in the states of Virginia and Tennessee. My main point behind all of that being there's a lot going on at any given time. There's a lot of moving parts that have to be kept in order, kept in sequence. And we have both internal and external stakeholders who want to be involved to differing degrees. And then on top of all that, of course, we all know that we're in a highly regulated industry. For us, it's a double hit because we are healthcare and higher ed. All of this kind of led me to this crisis point, if you will. That's often where change happens, is the crisis point. So for today, I am focusing solely on what I call preclinical compliance. Those are the tasks and documentation that students have to have in order to even set foot in their clinical site, okay? So I'm not going to get into everything to do with clinicals. I've done some work on that. If you're down the line interested, you can feel free to reach out to me separately. But today, we're just looking at preclinical documentation. So just some quick, again, context, just in case not all of you are from healthcare. There's basically three kind of task sets in preclinical compliance. There's the actual compliance requirements, and these would be the regulations that are set at the national level, the state level, the university level, our professional regulatory bodies, and then also we tend to have department and profession specific requirements. This would include your things like CDC recommended immunizations for healthcare workers that we have to track, confidentiality training on HIPAA, different policy agreements and policy reviews that the students have to do. The second group is document control. So annually, at least, we have to review and update all of our policies. And for me, there are 3 main policy manuals and then a couple addendums. We have to appropriately distribute the documents, again, to a complex group of stakeholders. And we have to do any technical troubleshooting for interoperability of our doc platform. So for us, for example, we are a Google Workspace school, but most hospital and healthcare systems, they can't access anything Google. So right away there, we can't share using our main university platform. And then again, there's that internal and external collaboration. We have to have communication continually with the students about their schedules, about their compliance, and about expectations. And then with external stakeholders at the hospitals to set up the schedules to get the students onboarded and all of that. So that is the environment that we're working in. Now I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more, even further. We're going to look just at the process where we collect these compliance document pieces from the students, where I chart and track them and have to troubleshoot and ensure they're up to standard before they start. We're going to zoom in just on that. Now, I teach management for my students, so I am a big fan of looking at things like ROI, return on investment. So I did a little bit of math for those of you who like this sort of thing. Now, let's say it's an average year, and I have about 50 students to onboard at once. There's a minimum for every student who is preparing for clinicals of 8 discrete documents, depending on how bundled they have made them. For example, vaccinations, you may get 1 nice document, or you may get 10 varying degrees of quality document. So on average, there's 8 minimum. So this means that there are 400 distinct documents to collect and review and keep organized across those 50. By my calculations, if there are no problems with the documentation, it takes me right around 3 minutes on average to work on each one of these 400 documents for initial screening and logging. So right there, we're up to 1,200 minutes or 20 hours of work. Now, looking at the last couple of years, about 1/4 to 1/3 of those documents, so I'm estimating low here, will require some sort of correction or follow-up. And typically that takes me an average of 20 minutes, depending on how many phone calls I need to make. So, whether it's just an issue of an outdated document or the wrong one. We have international students, so that can sometimes play a role. But on average, again, trying to estimate low, it takes another additional 20 minutes for every document that has a problem. So that would be about 100 documents that we're going to add an additional 20 minutes. And apparently I wrote 30. Well, so that gets us between 2,000 and 3,000 minutes, or an additional 50 hours. So for those of you following along at home, we have now reached 70 hours for just reviewing the documentation for the students. And for me, this is typically around a 2-month window when all of this happens. And on top of that, I also have managing and strategizing for our online program, teaching responsibilities, service to the university, and scholarly activities, which we're all required to do. Those of you in higher ed know exactly what I'm talking about. What this does not include, I have to build courses in the learning management system. I have to maintain our policy compliance. So there's a lot of research with the different compliance organizations to make sure we're up to date. We have to create and distribute the directions for the students for how to complete what they're doing, communicate with the stakeholders, place the students at the site. And once they're placed, there are usually another 5 to 10 documents worth of site-specific requirements that we now add. And then, of course, the answering of student and stakeholder emails about if I got their submission, why I won't accept something in a certain format. You all know the drill. When you look at just that, and if you were to actually look at my hourly rate, I think it came out to something like paying for an enterprise for SmartSuite for just me would probably save you close to 75 to 80% of the cost. For those of you interested, again, you can do the math in your head and you can definitely ask Rick, but they have been working on some flexibility with higher ed in how we structure our plans, which I think is amazing. And I think it's a sign of a great company. So when I started looking at my process, and because I spent about 3 years getting further and further behind, first year, admittedly, COVID played a part as it did for us all, but it was very frustrating to just remain behind in work that you should feel like you should be able to get done. So I started looking at ways to fix process. And here I actually have to give a shout out to Layla at Process Driven on YouTube, because she's the first person I heard talk about it in a way that I really understood. And I ended up with kind of these 5 big things that I wanted to focus on. And again, I'm telling you this because this is what actually led me into the world of SmartSuite. Number 1, I had a lot of redundant data entry. In order to make sure that the data was visible across all the different groups, I had 3 different systems in order to reach the stakeholders, and each one had a manual entry point. There's no interoperability. There was a very high clerical error rate. With using just manual spreadsheets and all the disparate documents, there were no high-level summaries available. If I was asked to provide a report by the next day to the dean's office, for example, I often had to go in and do all of that manually as well. There were very unclear workflows for my users. For example, students were often unclear on what they needed to do in what order, and it resulted in a lot of missing and incorrect documents. Again, manual data management means that I didn't have safety stops. There was a lot of delays from manual review, and all of the reminders I had to send out to the students were also manual. So you have to add time for every email you send. And then lastly, unfortunately, this is still a little bit of a thing, lack of unified communication channels, especially with the hospital. They really want us to, for example, get on MS Teams, but again, VCU locks us out of any external communications in there. So that's a problem for another day. And of course, you all get this message every day, adding more manpower, not an option. We don't have the budget, we're a small department. So being a good PhD student, I tried to narrow it down to a research question of sorts. And what I came up with actually happened after we spent a year in I'm not going to name it, but a fairly well-known and specifically marketed clinical tracking system. It's sold as a clinical tracking system. It's widely used, but we found that it was insanely expensive and its structure was super rigid. It was built for nursing and physical therapy, and the needs of my profession are wildly different from that. Allied health professions in general, it's very difficult to adapt these purpose-built systems. So we canceled that partnership. The ROI wasn't there. Meanwhile, I ended up on medical leave last fall for a couple of weeks, and I had nothing but time to mull over all these problems going around in my head. Right around that time, I stumbled on Layla's videos on SmartSuite and ended up where we are now. So the question I wanted to answer was, how do I build a single platform so that I don't have multiple sources that can act as a user interface for my students and my internal stakeholders, provide limited secure views for my clinical partners as my externals, and still provide me as the one managing it with high-level summaries and tracking that I can drill into when I need to, all while abiding by university and legal requirements. Hopefully you understand at this point that SmartSuite is the answer I came up with. What I have here as just a quick nod of sorts is that within my system, as you're going to see, I use SmartSuite as basically my core data repository and my backend structure, as well as my interface for my users. But because I have a lot of very complex form needs, I use Fillout to supplement with forms. They have a native integration with SmartSuite. They're great. And then I also use Relay.app for any of the more complex branching automations as well. So you'll see both of those just as I start to tour. So what I'd like to do now is just walk you through a little bit of how I built the system and then walk you through the system itself. For those of you concerned about data security, don't worry, it's all dummy data, which will be very obvious in this particular solution. So there is no student data for you to stumble upon. Some of you may be familiar with the universal systems model. It's just the idea that in any given system, you have inputs or things that enter the system, you have processes that transform your inputs, and you have outputs, which are the results that exit the system, and it's bound together through feedback to reach your goal. I like to frame almost everything in this because I find that it helps me take a bunch of parts that don't necessarily make sense together and turn them into one flow. Step one I recommend is list everything. List your policies, list your documents, list your standards, list all your current document systems and locations and what data they have in them. And then try to remap it as a single system. So what I like to do is label my list items by the type and owner. So are they owned by the student, me, the dean's office? Is it a document, a policy, a procedure? And then I go through and map it. So I just did a quick example for what I'm going to walk through. So this particular workflow focuses on policy acknowledgements. The students receive a set of policies that add on to their student handbook according to the rotations they're going into. They are then required to read that policy. They need to sign that they understand it, and then I have to collect that documentation. Now, you all know university students, they often like to sign things without reading. So I also added about 3 years ago a knowledge quiz that they have to pass to ensure that they were getting the information. So before all of this, we had this disjointed system. And what I'm going to show you is how we ended up here. We have various different inputs, and you'll see that there's not as many inputs. And we have our outputs, and they're transformed by processes. Now, I put this up here for those of you who like these sort of graphs. You can go back and pause and look at it. But what I really want to do at this point is actually jump into SmartSuite itself and show you exactly what I am talking about. So let me move over here and change my sharing options. Okay, so this is my SmartSuite. It's just a copy of what I had built to actually use so that I could make sure there was no student data in there and that I remained compliant in that regard. And I should have given this disclaimer at the beginning, but while I performed this project working for VCU, this particular presentation is done independently of VCU. It is not meant to reflect their views. And I also, as a disclaimer, I'm not receiving any compensation from SmartSuite, Relay, or Fillout for any of this. When you come in here, the first thing I did was I split up the types of data that I had. For those of you who are SmartSuite newbies, the way that SmartSuite works is from your dashboard, you are able to create what they call solutions. Solutions are basically a bundle of tables that hold your data. So for me, I created one for my clinical rotations, and that's where I'm going to stay today. Each one of these tabs at the top is a table. You can also see them off to the side now by looking at your listings. And what I'm going to look at with you today are just three: my students table, compliance, and document library. You can see that I have it set up so that the first place I come when I come in is my compliance overview dashboard. So I get a really quick view of how long I have to my next clinical. I have a really quick view of the overall compliance status of my students and how many of them are in different stages. And then for me, I like to have a little summary grid of information at the bottom so I can see their overall status and where they are in their tasks and the last time that I or they updated it. So I put all my most important information at the beginning, right where I could grab it very quickly so that I could decide where to go without having to dig through and look at a bunch of individual data points. Now, I'm going to show you my data schema because I think it's one of the coolest things that SmartSuite does. For those of you not in the data table world, a data schema just shows you your individual tables, the data they contain, and the relationships between the tables. Especially if you're new to this, this is very handy because you can see where all of your data is coming from and where it's going to. So looking in here, you can see I had this all set up for all of clinicals. We're going to just focus down here. So I have my student table, and I have within that table a link to their compliance record so that I'm not re-entering student information, as you'll see. And I have also links to their actual placements for later on and their surveys. Within compliance, I have assigned policies for them to look at that come from the document library, as well as the student data. So that's the linkages that we're working with. Let me actually show you a little bit more of what we have. So when students log in, what they see is this. They see a student dashboard, and each of these is actually filtered, each widget, by the logged in user, which means that they are only seeing the things that they have been assigned. Now, obviously, this has a longer list down here because I'm assigned to everything. But I did for this one, I made sure that my profile was attached to only this test student so that I could ensure it's all they could see. So they can come in, they can see their overall status, they can see their compliance status, and once they're assigned, they'll see their placements. This is their homepage. There's also a card view if they prefer, and hopefully now you completely see that this is dummy data. So they can come in and they have this neat little card. This is what I would eventually use for my clinical sites, where they can come in and say, okay, I have Han Solo coming to my site. Let's go in here. I can view their emergency contacts real quick. I can see their details if I need them, like their email, their phone number. And then because this, and I haven't played with this yet because it's brand new, but you can actually conditionally hide these different sections also now based on the user. So if I didn't want my external stakeholders to see my administration and maybe the profile supplements area, I would just turn it off for those users. If I didn't want my students to see any other things I had going on, I would turn it off. I haven't played with it yet because it's new and it's the end of the semester, but you should be aware of that. As far as administration, it's fairly empty because this is a cleaned copy. The other thing I really like here for my own views, and I do have private views, as you can see, I have my underlying database, right? This is the data table that underlies everything else in this table, regardless of the view. And this is a really important concept in SmartSuite, your data does not change. I can come up here and I could group these students by, say, let's see, where's the program? I could group them by the program they're in. I have changed nothing about the data. All I've done is make it so that I now have these beautiful groups, one for BS and one for categorical masters. And I can focus from there. I can also filter, I can sort, there's any number of things. And underneath all of that, I have these full records that I can open. It's like a student profile. All right. There's so much I would love to show you about records, but I'm going to try to stick to a high-level overview. Suffice to say, there are also notifications and chat features within the record you can see. You can view the activity history. So for those of you who need to know who made a change and when, you can see it over here. And you can also comment back and forth with the students or other stakeholders as well. So this is where I store my basic student information. This is all my demographics, their progress in the program, and it's like the core student record. Now, linking to that, I have my compliance records. Now, my compliance records, I'm going to show you my overall view. Each and every one is, and I'm going to come down here to, let's open Sabine. All of these records link back to the student right here with the student profile. So if I were to actually click on this, I can actually go and view the student. You can see their summary of their record right here. I didn't have to re-enter anything. I have Sabine's name, their profile. I have their ID number if I need it, which a lot of us, the ID number is the fast way to look things up. And if I want to, I can even just go ahead and open that record from here. I don't need to backtrack. I used a couple of fun features that SmartSuite has. Number one, I created a compliance list. This populates automatically when this record is created, and it gives automatic due dates and assigns them to the student. What this boils down to is if they are running out of time on a particular item, I don't have to send them an email. The system can send it itself. I can set that up in automations. That saves me a ton of email time. And the best part is if I send the email from within SmartSuite, it's all on this record. I don't have to go back and prove that I've done this communication. Then what I have set up here are sections based on the different requirements that they have. So I mentioned there's a bunch of different kinds of requirements. So of course we have their vaccinations down here at the bottom, and I have a place for their overall vaccination compliance record. And then I also have a place for documenting things like COVID-19, meningococcal. All of this is populated by a single form, so it looks like a lot for the student to do. It's really not. I'm not going to get into that one today just because that one's more complex. What I want to show you is the policy acknowledgements that you can set up. So the chain of events that happens in here is I will take my list of students who are ready for clinical rotations. In my program, that typically is a Google Sheet to start. That's just the default that we get when we're extracting information. I take that Google Sheet, download it as a CSV, and stick it into SmartSuite. I am able to beautifully align what I want to go and where. There's very little correction for me to do. Again, a topic for another day. And then once that student record is populated in the student table, a compliance record in the compliance table is automatically made and linked back to that student. So I don't have to make these records. They happen automatically. And these compliance task checklists happen automatically. I tell it, I want all of these things. I want them to have this due date. I want them to be assigned this way. The other thing that happens automatically is, and this is where I'm going to focus, under our policy acknowledgements, the policies that the student is actually responsible for because of the rotations they're in are automatically placed here for them. They don't need to go over to the document library, although they can. They don't have to figure out what it is that they need. It's right there. So if Han here wanted to go and take a look at his policies for graduate rotations, he would just come over here. And I'm realizing that's a very bad example because that one I'm in the middle of editing. I'm going to go over here instead and show you this one. What I've used for these policies are the SmartDoc field within SmartSuite. It's a great field, basically a rich content editor with additional fun add-ons. So every policy I have, it has a title, which is its identifier. For me, I'm the document owner. If I were to bring in other department policies, it might be my department chair or another faculty member. I have the document status, and I can set it for needs review. If, for example, a new set of standards comes out and I need to make sure I come back, I could archive it if it's been outmoded. I have the associated rotations. So here, this is just for my undergraduates. And the beauty of the associated rotations is this is how I tell SmartSuite to assign the policies. If a student comes in and they have a category of undergraduate MLS, they're going to be assigned this as one of their policies. If they come in with categorical, they wouldn't be. So that way it's automatically set. I also added for future proofing a place where I can assign a document reviewer and a review due date so that I can have these documents reviewed hopefully by others. Each document also has a description of what it is, and then there's a set of directions about reading the policies contained, and then there's a link to a form. And this form is the knowledge quiz that I need them to fill out, as well as their signature sheet. The contents is where the meat of it happens. And this is where I'm absolutely in love, I have to say, with the SmartDocs field. You can expand it out to take a look. You can add a table of contents. If I wanted to know, if I was a student and wanted to know if I am eligible for exemption, I could come down here. All of these are collapsible, so it makes it really easy for the students to go through quickly and find what they need. As far as things like course grading, general policies, they're all in here. And then you can also, and I'll try to pull up here, you also can include fun things like how disciplinary action works, right? You can include a nice diagram. This more or less works just like a Google Doc, but you also have the ability to do things like tag people in your workplace to look at it, or add a checklist or other interactive option. Once they're done, they come over here and they go ahead and they click on the link. And the link's going to take them on over to fill out, and this is what they see. They get a 10-question quiz. Fill out is nice as a form because one of the things you can do is create a quiz and a grading and all of that. They go through and answer, and basically what happens is if they get an 80% or higher, then they've passed the quiz. And if they pass the quiz, then they are allowed to go ahead and sign their handbook acknowledgement. If they don't pass the quiz, they can't sign the required acknowledgement until they get that 80%. So it's a built-in safeguard that they have passed that quiz and they're ready to go. Once they pass the quiz, it finishes out, it lets them sign. For those of you who haven't seen fill out, you can do a nice signature field and all of that here. Then this gets caught over in Relay. Relay detects that there's a new submission, and then I have a bunch of things happen. As of right now, the one thing that I can't do in SmartSuite is branching logic in my automations, which is a lot of where I bring in Relay. I would assume that's coming eventually, but for right now, this is my tool of choice. It comes in, it grabs the submission, finds the associated record, and you can see if they passed with an 80% or more, it's going to go ahead and create that document for me, that signed acknowledgement. If it's less than, it's going to add a comment to the record so that I can see that they failed, and then send an email to that particular email user. You can put in a template, you can put in the score and remind them, hey, you need to retake this until you can do it. Meanwhile, back in SmartSuite, once the student has completed that task, over in their compliance record, what shows up is under policy acknowledgements, their signed documents are appended right here under the signed acknowledgement documents section. The student doesn't need to do anything. I don't need to go find the form that's been completed or the document. It's automatically the PDF finished signed version is sent back to SmartSuite by Relay and uploaded. And it also will change the policy acknowledgement status to submitted. So on my dashboard, I will now be able to see, oh, I have these students who have submitted. I need to go review it. I would come over, take a look at the document, and I can change it then to either compliant or non-compliant as suits the situation. And they do this for each and every one of their assigned policies. Each time they complete one, that signature sheet is uploaded, or they get an email because they failed the quiz and they need to fix it. Rather than using our learning management system, which is Canvas, where I have to go in, I have to manually grade, I have to send comments back and forth. I then have to download the PDFs from Canvas, which all of you who use it will know is a pain, into Google, sort them to different folders, etc. It all just comes and goes automatically, which saves me a huge amount of time. Similarly, one of my other favorites is what I have going with the background check and drug screen. We are required to have them sign a statement of understanding before they can start their screening process about what they can and what I am allowed and not allowed to do for them in the process, as well as some legal things that the college wanted us to cover. So in the past, I've had an issue where they'll go and do the screening and I'll never get the statement of understanding, which is a big problem. Now I have it set with these nice directions, and I love how this presents. This button right here, complete a CHP statement of understanding. I can put directions in it, and I'm just going to show you real quick. This is a button field type for those of you not familiar. And the beauty of a button is it is a link. It's a very nicely presented link. You can either do a static link that never changes, or as you can see here, you can do a URL formula. All a URL formula does, and don't get intimidated because it looks like code, all it does is it tells the record, send this information when this button is clicked into the form. That means the students don't have to fill in things like their ID number, their name, anything I've programmed shows up automatically in the form. And that is huge and will be huge for my clinicals as well, because when a preceptor finishes with a student, needs to do their evaluations, they're going to come in, they're going to click on a button, and they're going to be redirected to a form that is pre-filled with everything they need for that student without them having to re-enter. Okay, the button is actually honestly one of my very favorite features of SmartSuite, and I would like us to talk about it more. Now, I am not a coder. I did not come up with this code on my own. One of the beauties of fill out, and one thing I would check if you're integrating, is that when you have specific URL passing, and I don't on this form, it generates that link for you already. You don't have to do the coding. So you copy and paste the link from one place into the other, and it just works. Okay, before I have to go, I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions, or if people want to see specific things. I'm going to just come over here. I just had a couple of major takeaways I wanted to share as an encouragement, if you will. Hopefully that worked, because my screen share just shifted.
Sorry to interrupt, Caitlin. See on the Canva side of it, the Canva screen here.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, that's what I figured. That's fine. So what couple of things I've learned, because at this point, Rick has been with me through initial assessment of will this work for us, all the way through talking about how Smart Suite is set up to serve in higher ed, and they have been really taking the ball and running with it there. So we've been through a governance process together. We've been through writing proposals, all sorts of things. And here's my advice to those of you who want to pursue a project like this. Number one, if you want to be convincing to your administration, you need to be ready to show a build that exemplifies your goals. It's not going to be enough to verbally describe. This is too niche and unfamiliar for a lot of people. So be prepared to make a mock-up, use some dummy data. ChatGPT is actually great for making dummy data. That's how I got mine. I told it I wanted all these different things for Star Wars characters, and it just went for it. So have a build ready to go to show what you're talking about. Number two, find a way to frame your project that aligns with the mission of the strategic plan of your institution. Basically, all accredited institutions have a very readily available strategic plan. If you can find it and find that language and make it represent how your project serves that, you are now speaking the language of administration, and that's huge. And then lastly, and hopefully Rick will be able to chime in on this, be ready to hang in there through some sort of IT governance process. We're a highly regulated industry. We have to respect federal laws, state laws, student security, healthcare security, and you're going to be asked to prove that this is a secure enough platform in order to do what you want to do. Now, the good news is, and here's where I'll toss it to Rick, the kind of generally accepted certificate in higher ed for data security is the VPAT. And Smart Suite does in fact have a VPAT. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Rick, or anything about
Just
your experience with higher ed.
me too. Yeah, been in the space for a while, been working with higher ed here and previously at a different workflow or productivity tool. And I think the biggest thing is exactly what you mentioned. It's not too dissimilar from a large enterprise in the way that we'll be put through the ringer, so to speak. We're very comfortable doing so. We have a 100% track record with passing security reviews, knock on wood, and that's not a challenge to any folks out there. But we've been through with major universities, VCU, UCLA, Stanford, UPenn, you name it, on and on, globally as well. And through that, we've passed 400 plus security reviews. If there is potential scope, and Caitlin, I can't compliment you enough for the way that you're thinking about the benefit of the greater university. It's not something that we always get in first touch points with folks from universities, because shadow IT does exist. People are trying to figure out what they might want to use. I think once they see the greater application across the university, we welcome you. We don't shy away from having these conversations with your IT teams. The last thing we want is for you to create this incredible build and kind of custom software that you're creating here in Smart Suite, and then to have it knocked down because we didn't go through the proper IT protocol. Please get those folks involved early on. Not only are we comfortable in going through that process, but I'll also say it's happened multiple times where those IT folks are finding use cases for themselves. Oh, so I can use it for this. They get a little bit selfish, and that benefits because our model is user-based. It's not solution-based.
Yeah. And to that point, because of the nature of this program, one of the kind of fun things I would say you should consider is go ahead and use the platform for your process. This is what I did for our IT process. And clearly I didn't update it when we finished, so the target dates are all off. I took everything that I needed to answer. I put it in here. I also added Rick and the Smart Suite support team to it so they could comment. I have action items, and when it's time to share your write-up with your governance people, you can go ahead and invite them straight into the platform to do it.
Yeah. I love that you did this. This is just the initiative that Caitlin took here. As some folks send us into not to sound judgy, but some very antiquated systems, really hard for the vendor in this case to go through. And we get them all the time. We're doing dozens and dozens of these, and some of these systems are a bear to get through. The fact that you replicated that very quickly in SmartSuite. I love it. A couple questions flowing through here, if I might. And thank you,
Absolutely.
thank you for all the time that you put into setting up for this presentation, but also just the build and the creativity that you demonstrated here. I know this is only a fraction of some of the ideas that you have in innovating this, right? Like you said,
I see from my workspace that there's a lot going on. But yeah,
quickly,
it's
my favorite Caitlin story I have to share is, or maybe 2 months ago, when we were saying, hey, we should really do a webinar together to highlight and complement all the work that you're doing here. And I got an email, maybe it was on a Monday morning. Hey, Rick, really excited about something. Let's chat. I have some ideas here. We connected, and Caitlin was like, don't want you to think of me differently, but I happen to be doing a little SmartSuite work over the weekend. And I went to bed one night and I woke up in the middle of the night and was like, this problem I was trying to solve, because of we call them platform primitives, because all the things that you can do in SmartSuite, we're basically giving you a Lego kit to go and build. It's not like a point solution. This is how you use it. And Caitlin had
that's a
thought
great
of those,
analogy.
right? Like this and this together. And I think you said something like your husband, your partner, you jumped out of bed and you went and made these changes in SmartSuite, built what you were thinking of. And they were like, whoa, what's going on? You're like, I figured it out. I've got the answer. I think that's just a testament to your problem solving nature. As we talked about, you're a puzzle solver kind of mindset. And I love that we
Mhm.
were able to offer you this platform to go and build and problem solve with the
Yeah.
flexibility that many point solutions just won't have, right?
And I'll say one more time, because I know a lot of people in this crowd probably don't have a lot of time for additional training and things in addition to what you're already doing. If you can build a Google form and a spreadsheet, you can build in SmartSuite. That's all you need to know how to do.
That's it. Yeah, no coding, no development experience required. In a budding, so this is the third in our set of education, SmartSuite for higher education series, with many more slated in the near future. We do have a budding community of people in this space, and this is why we're going to keep doing these sessions, is we care very much about higher education, both to be used internally by faculty and staff, but also exposure to students early on. We believe that this movement of no code is going to empower the next wave of problem solvers, of builders. And it's each of you that are joining here, and the folks that you're connected to are the ones that are going to give exposure to students. That question came up here. Andreas has a question. What roles would students have within SmartSuite?
Ooh, that's
So
a good question.
yeah,
Just say, do you want me to run with that one?
please do. Yeah.
Okay. So the answer is it depends. And the reason it depends is solely because it's going to matter what your budget is and how you are paying for it. And honestly, if you're paying for it, because a lot of what I just showed you, you can do in the free tier of SmartSuite. So not saying you have to pay. I currently pay, I think, for the middle tier or lowest tier. I'm not paying all out, and I'm still able to do this, is the point. Within SmartSuite, just briefly, there are basically paid users and free users. And so the reason I say it depends what students can do is it depends on if you bring them in as free users with limited ability to change things, or if they're paid users. For me, they're in as free users. So that means they can mark off things that they're assigned on checklists. They can change statuses of things they're assigned within records, from processing to submitted or done or something like that. They can comment back and forth with me, and they can click those buttons. So they can't do things like fill in new data into fields or upload documents that way if they're free users. If they're paid, that all changes. And then there are multiple levels within paid of how much access they can have. For example, I can't share it because there's student data all over. I would share it privately if someone was interested. I actually use SmartSuite to manage my spring education management course because I use specifications grading, and Canvas is not well set up for that. Each student has both a set of records assigned in there and they have a profile here in SmartSuite. And their member directory feature works great. I'm actually going to scroll down to someone who is not a student to show you, but you can bring them in and have all this information here already. So they can come in, they can have a profile, you can assign things to them. What happens is once they're assigned, they show up in their workspace. All my students in 411, 580, once they were assigned, it showed up in their workspace. It has all their grading rubrics, their syllabus. I use OER, Open Educational Resources, in my class. So all of those have a document library. I even dabbled in using it for making rubrics this year, but it allows everything to be in one place for them as well as for me. And geez, I really want to open it and show you. So the other fun thing is there's lots of scheduling capabilities within SmartSuite because again, this is, I think originally grew from project management is like the heart of original, even though it has so many other uses. There's a lot of date capabilities, due dates, date ranges. And so my course calendar this year, I built in there and then I made it a publicly shared view and embedded it in Canvas so that it would always be up to date. If the students were paid users, and if I were a program manager, I would consider giving each of them potentially their own solution for tracking themselves throughout the program itself. For example, curriculum and course management you can do in here. You can have a database of courses that you can link back to the students as they complete them. All sorts of different things there. You can bring in your faculty members and link them there. And that way they can track their progress throughout their specific track. I know a lot of places we still have paper printouts that we put in student folders in higher ed to do that. You can do it in here. You can also, and this is real fun, you can make a self-calculating grade book, which I really wish I could have time to show you, but I don't have a copy of that without student information in it either. But you can set it up so that in one solution, you have a table for each of your classes. And at the end of the semester, your faculty will upload their grades that they probably pulled out of Canvas. So it's probably already in a CSV because most of us are using that. And then it will automatically link using the student ID back to the student record and all the grades will self-calculate and you don't have to do anything. The students can use it for homework tracking. They can use it for, honestly, I could see this being used for easy resume or CV construction to some extent, or portfolios.
Sure.
It really is only limited by your creativity. And honestly, if you don't have a SmartSuite account, you can make a free one because there's no like consequence and go in their template gallery because this is where I get most of my ideas. So I will say my preference is to build from scratch. So I don't often build straight from here, but I know that's not everyone's preference. But if you wanted to teach them how to do some project management, you could tell them pick one of these and use it to track your assignments this semester. They could use it for calendars. You could use it for your department calendar. What am I missing, Rick? Because I just went off a major rabbit hole there.
This is a perfect.
There we go.
Illustration.
Actually, here we go. There are some purpose-built things for students. They can manage college applications. There's a training solution, a student course organizer. You can view all of these for free without any commitment or problems, just to give yourself an idea of what you can do. So I would say what the student's role is really just limited, one, by your budget, probably, and two, by your imagination.
So true. Brian has an extension on the user and access question here. Can users be adjusted at an individual level for their privileges, or are they categorized into groups?
Do you want to answer that, Rick?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, you can do either and both or none. If you go into workspace administration, and again, I'm going to try not to expose student data as much as I can, you'll see that there's a tally at the top of how many users you have. Those are invited, those who are licensed, and you can also change their role. So you can have all these different roles except for guest or paid. Guest is your free role. You can have a member type, and then you can also have teams. I have teams for adjuncts and assistants. I have my students from my one class, so that what happens is when I did permissions for that class solution, I just changed the permissions for this entire group of 480, 411, 580 students. I didn't have to do it individually. Coordinators and site administrators, I don't have any in yet, but I have a group ready to go. And when you actually add a team member, it is going to ask you what the role and member type is. Obviously, so it's warning me here, new members are $10 per month per seat. That's because right now I haven't selected, but if I go to the free, that goes away. So you'll know if you're going to be charged or not. It's very transparent. You can select what type they are, which, Rick, we got to fix this because there is no student or teacher type on here. And then you can assign their team right away. So if they're a student in my class, I can bring them in as if they're in my class right away. And this is just an entry. You can enter as many emails as you want, either by line or by comma. So if you have all your emails in a spreadsheet, you just copy them out, paste them in here, and you're good to go. All the invitations go out. And unless it's changed, they still get a pretty good tutorial right when they come in through the landing page. So you don't really need to do much on your own with that unless you want to. And I'll plug that too. They have a really wonderful free Smart Suite Academy also. Unlike a couple of other companies I assessed, you do not have to go behind a paywall in order to access their education here. So again, if you're Smart Suite curious, highly recommend it. Their community is amazing as well. And YouTube has become a heck of a resource too, as people have really taken this and run with it.
Yeah.
But yes, access you can manage either by group, and you can also, if you come up into your actual settings, you can go to granular permissions down here, and I could do a specific person and set their access. All the accesses are described, so you're never wondering about what level of access you're giving. And I also use the added security of, like I said, when the student comes in, and we'll see if my internet is slowing down a little. When I actually look at all of this, I have it set so that there is a filter on it. And I'm going to have to display the report toolbar to show, but you see there's a filter here. And it's sorted where the student profile is exactly the current user, meaning they're not going to see anything unless they match that student profile. So there's safeguards both within overall access mechanisms within Smart Suite, and then you can add layers even within your solutions. More recently, you can also do things like hide whole tables. Again, it's a new feature, so it's not in here, but you can look at how people are using that if you dig around online. So it's very controllable and customizable.
Amazing. Hey, we are butting up on the hour. I knew that we would because there's just so much to share. This is, by the way, folks, like 5 to 10% of what Caitlin's built in here and she showed today. Please go and find time with her to see some of the other amazingness she's created. A few rapid fire questions in the minute and change we have left, if you don't mind.
All right, bring it on.
Yep. So we have one here. How long did it take you to set everything up to use?
Let's see. The first solution I built, because while I was actually learning, I probably spent maybe 1 to 2 hours a day for a week, maybe 2. That one's hard to judge though, because again, the first one I built, I was on medical leave and had paid medications and other things. So I won't lie, my memory is not great for that. But now that I'm very comfortable in it, I can build a whole solution probably in about 4 hours, start to finish, depending on how, if there's complex formulas I need to use, or if I need to build things, say, and fill out a relay to go with it. If it was all in Smart Suite at this point and I didn't need to use an external tool or do anything super fancy, and if the data was already ready to come in, man, I want to say I could do it in an hour or 2. If the data was already formatted, just because the way the data import works, even if you don't have the structure ready in Smart Suite, like you can build the structure as you import the data. If I have my student grade spreadsheet, I can import it and I'll create the fields that I want everything to go in as I bring it in. I'm working right now on the general education curriculum committee at VCU, and one of the things I'm working on is a course database for them. And I think I set up the bulk of that solution in a couple hours too. It's incredibly fast once you get it.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, if you did like the basics track in the Smart Suite Academy, you could probably knock it out in a weekend easy. And I say that having a 5-year-old that was playing with me while I was doing it the first time. So it's extremely doable. I would say accessibility wise, this is far and away my favorite thing that I've used. And I've used a couple.
Love to hear that. Yeah, the visual component has been so thoughtfully built and created just to be different than other tools that feel like you're actually in some system. And yeah. Rachel, golden question. Was the institution very open to pay for this platform?
That's a very good question and a bit of a complicated one. So yes, we are open. Okay. So this had to be done at the department level. Let me back up because typically in the College of Health Professions, that's just the way things go as far as the dissemination of innovation. Usually one department adopts and then it kind of spreads. The payment wasn't necessarily an issue so much as my timing in the budget cycle mattered more than I thought. So maybe that's another lesson to take.
Sure.
You do need to pay attention to where you are in the budget cycle. As far as like cost comparison, I think I calculated if we were all in for absolutely every last knickknack and level and highest level that I wanted, we were looking at $1,500 a year without any discounts or changes or anything like that, compared to, I think we were at 14,000 for the other solution we tried. So when you put it in those numbers, it becomes very appealing to most financial people. And again, I did a little bit of work with ROI also to talk about how those hours are being used, and that makes it an impact too. I think the big thing to do is map out what users you have and what level of access they need. And then honestly, get on the website and talk to Rick or one of the other folks at SmartSuite about what the different models are that could work, because they're just really good at figuring out what meets the need in a very like customized way that I can't address that across the board because everyone's so different. I answered. It's not an issue of payment so much as at the time I asked to pay for it. The first time I asked to pay for it, we were 3/4 of the way through the budget cycle, which I should have perhaps thought about. And I have since then. This is where it gets a little difficult because unfortunately I am planning to step down from VCU at the end of the summer. So I don't know what my predecessor will do, or I'm sorry, not my predecessor, what my replacement will do. But I know that my chair has been very supportive of what we've built here. And ideally in a dream world, I'd love to see us using this for things like maybe tracking research projects and grants too in the department and have everything in one place instead of having to log in with my giant long institutional password in 5 different places.
Yeah.
And they do single sign-on and OAuth as well. So I know that's bonus points with IT people.
Sure. Last two questions I like asking here. We're just a bit over time, but we still have a group of folks that are listening in. A testament to you, Caitlin. Favorite feature in SmartSuite? Would that be?
Favorite? Oh man. Oh man, oh man, oh man. Oh gosh, that's okay. So I'm torn. I'm torn here. I think I can narrow it down to 3.
All right, let's hear help.
I think I can narrow it down to 3. Number one, the linked record field. The linked record field being the one where are you? Where you can come in here for this student and you can literally go to find their record over here. And when you link it, you don't have to re-enter anything. It's just there. So that connection between things, that's definitely one of them. The other ones, I've already mentioned the button. I love that ability to have a dynamic URL. I think that makes a huge user experience difference. And then, gosh, I'm torn between dashboards and smart docs. I think I would have to say the dashboards simply because I love a good data visualization, and this doesn't do like justice to what all it can do. You can do embeds from outside. You can embed things from Google, Word, web pages. There's different SmartSuite views. You can do charts, which they're constantly working on updating. You can do the data schema video. So like I could have it all in one like tutorial platform in theory for my preceptors where they come in, they could watch a greeting video from me. I can embed a smart doc that has all their directions. I can have links to the things they need. Yeah, I think the dashboard has to be one of my favorites just because of how flexible it is and how I can make it right for that particular set of users, as well as that high level that I need as an administrative role.
Yes, yes.
I love all of it, but I think those are my top 3.
They're all great call outs and pretty unique differentiators for SmartSuite, the dashboard in particular. One of the favorite underlying things there is if you, as Caitlin, but the fact that it's drill through. So if you just hover over one of those for the overall compliance, and click in, You have a question about the data, this is real time updated. You can jump right into things. You can have it all set up and get into those records without having to navigate and jump through different pieces of your solution. So all the information's right there in front of you.
Yep.
Amazing. Last question. Bit of feedback for the Smart Suite team. Is there anything either roadmap facing, or this is your opportunity to pitch for what you'd like to see us
Oh
prioritize?
boy, John Derbyshire and I have been having a conversation in the community actually the last couple days, and he is the founder and CEO, if I'm getting his title right. So that'll let you know he's a company CEO who's in the community boards, hovering and watching for things that he finds interesting, which I think is great. I think one of the things that I am hoping to see and waiting to see is a little bit more flexibility, specifically in the dashboards for visualization. So a lot of you who work in data would be familiar with Tableau is the big one, or Microsoft BI, and how those work. Just the ability to even more readily set on the charts, what's my x-axis and my y-axis. There's a couple of times where the field type will limit what data you can plug into which chart, which I know has been, I think it's under work right now. And I know there's a couple other things, and you can actually see it when you add widgets. You'll see things that say, let's see, what's an example I know? Like this, they'll have a coming soon badge if it's something that's being worked on and close to release. So I think increasing the abilities there in the data visualizations, and then I've said it in the community and a couple other people have echoed it, the ability to have a widget where it's basically the result of a formula so that we can call out like a really customized number. I know a lot of people in sales have been interested in that as well, but for me, being able to have, I don't know, a count of total unsatisfactory marks on all evaluations for the semester would be a nice one to be able to pull. And I can do that. I can do that through a formula and or automation or a couple other routes within a table. I'd love to have it on a dashboard. So
Maybe
we'll
sooner than
see.
you think. Yes,
I
yes, yes.
I'm hoping, I'm watching anxiously. I highly recommend if you see them advertising for like a release announcement video, get on it because it's always really fun.
Yeah, that is a bit of magic. Quarterly, we've been doing those, if not a bit sooner. Over, what
Yes.
did I say, last 70 new features and enhancements released year to date so far. So our development team is
Yeah.
quite busy. I appreciate everyone extending some time here and staying on with us and joining us today. Caitlin, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. And I hope this sparks more conversations with you and the education community. You're doing amazing work, pushing the bounds in education
Appreciate it.
and helping people to think more innovatively. So thank you for the time.
Thank you all for taking time. I know it's a very busy time of semester for those of you in education, so I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, y'all. Caitlin, take care. Cheers.